We've all had the experience of hearing someone speak against our beliefs in an over-the-top way and reacted negatively, becoming more sure we're right. Have you ever later come around to the other side on an issue and realized that that extreme speech and your reaction to it was actually a hurdle to accepting the truth? I watch a decent bit of Tim Pool's content. Recently, he's talked about the idea that due to all the division in the US, a civil war may be inevitable. He's brought up some interesting points on the subject, like how the US Civil War wasn't really an internal cultural conflict like most civil wars, but rather a war between two governments. The form the next civil war might take could also be very different, perhaps more of a cold civil war that we're already engaged in. I don't agree that it's quite so bad that some kind of civil unrest is inevitable, but I do think there are things we need to address to prevent the possibility. A big one is the tendency to assume that everyone who opposes us is deliberately evil. If you don't get to know people who oppose you, to understand what they think and why they think it, it's very easy to dehumanize them. While I disagree with Tim on most things politically, he's a pretty good journalist. I don't just watch his content for that, though. I try to ensure that a significant portion of my media diet, the majority really, comes from people I disagree with. I do this to avoid being reactionary. I'm aware of the dictionary definition and the history of the term, but in the modern world it's extremely silly and doesn't really reflect the obvious meaning of that root word and suffix. I'm using it in a more general, natural way to mean anyone who takes a position based primarily on negative reaction to an opposing position. When you react to your opposition by taking an over-the-top position, they are likely to do the same thing in response. This usually triggers a war of escalation where people make more and more extreme statements in a form of virtue signaling. When that happens, people who have tried to stick to reasonable positions often wind up attacked from both sides, since anyone who isn't joining my tribe must be the enemy. They may be playing devil's advocate, making a particular point or distinction, or just trying to appeal to certain groups of people, but they will usually be ignored by the people who should be calming down and listening to them. Antagonizing people is the opposite of convincing people of the truth and bringing them together. It's important to be introspective. On any given issue, there are people who agree with you, people who disagree with you, and people who are undecided. If you make an extreme, irrational, or simply unnecessary argument, you're not benefiting your cause with any of those groups. For people who agree with you, at best you are wasting their time. At worst, you might convince them to start using your flawed argument over a better one. For people who oppose you, their opposition to you is reinforced. They become more confident that everyone who agrees with you is wrong, more confident that their side is correct. They are also likely to take a more extreme stance themselves in reaction to yours, making it difficult to reach them with a more accurate and powerful message. Those issues are almost irrelevant, though, compared to the majority of people who are unconvinced. Most people don't hold strong beliefs on most issues. They might take a default position based on their friends, family, or general political alignment, but they won't hold to it very strongly unless you start insulting them. They should be your primary audience, since they're ripe for being convinced. If you make reactionary arguments, they are likely to in turn react by opposing you. There's no circumstance where making an over-the-top, incorrect argument is a good thing. It harms everyone regardless of who is right or wrong. If a society fractures itself in enough ways for long enough, that's when you see things like civil wars happening. Thankfully, we're still a long way from that in the West, but that doesn't mean we should be okay with seeing how close we can get. Developing apologetics is an important part of holding a worldview. Having strong opinions about something without the accompanying powerful arguments to defend them is often a sign that you are simply wrong. When you realize this may be your situation, take the time to dig into the subject in as unbiased a manner as you can. In particular, spend time researching counter-arguments to the ones you want to use. Try to prove yourself wrong before being certain you're right. Either you will realize that you were wrong, giving you the opportunity to correct yourself, or you will gain more understanding and improve your ability to confidently sway people to the truth. Either way, you will be better equipped to improve your life and the lives of those around you. Hopefully you will also gain a dose of humility. Having seen that, like me and everyone else, you are flawed and imperfect, you should be more forgiving of others' follies, understanding that it's easy to be wrong without intending to be evil. Ultimately, this will make you better equipped to engage those who don't agree with you in a productive manner. It's also worth taking the time to empathize with people, separating the views from the person. The next time you hear someone espousing evil, understand that while the policies they are proposing may be abhorrent, hating the individual doesn't do anything other than bring you personal satisfaction. Treating them like a monster will only radicalize them further. Instead, try to connect with them on a personal level. Find common ground and use that as an anchor for understanding your differences. You probably won't bring them around, but at least you'll be a positive influence rather than a negative one. Being reactionary is a natural human tendency, but there are two noteworthy groups who stoke the flames of division and paranoia. The first is politicians. It's much easier to get people to cede power to you if they fear something. No matter what side they are on, you should never trust politicians. They are almost always the most evil, power-hungry people in society, regardless of what tribe they are leading. The other group is mass media. Nothing is easier to sell than fear, disgust, and hatred. That's why when you're looking for opposing perspectives, you should try to get them from relatively ordinary people rather than big media sources. Whether it's most media for progressives, things like Fox, Breitbart, or Drudge for conservatives, or even say Reason for libertarian ideas, none of them actually represent the views of mainstream adherents to those philosophies. Rather, they are professional propagandists whose job is manipulating people. They will not give you a good understanding of how or what ordinary people actually think. Get out there and talk to people in real life. Just engage random people on the street, in a park, a store, whatever. Whatever your beliefs are, you'll likely be surprised to find what people actually think. You'll often have more in common than you expect, and where you differ, people will frequently have understandable, human reasons for their biases. You'll also find that swaying opinions doesn't have much to do with the angry ranting that is most of what you see online and in mass media. Finally, I don't want you to take what I've said here to an extreme. It's fine to mock opposing views, but be conscious of context. Making fun of things you oppose in private with your friends is very different from ridiculing people to their face. Always try to ask yourself if what you're doing is helping or hurting, preferably before you do it. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear your experiences. Have there been times when the way people expressed your views drove you away from them, even though you later wound up agreeing? Have you found yourself taking reactionary positions? What do you think are steps we can take to improve how we communicate with people we don't agree with?